A Tale of a Muslim Girl and Her Infidel Lover. A novel by Dr. A. Ahmed. This is an intriguing epic story which resonates with love, resilience, courage, and sacrifice. Before we dive into the tapestry of the story, I would like to remind the reader that this novel is narrated in 3 books. Book 3. The Muslim Apostate Girl and Her Infidel Lover. Copyrights. All rights are reserved. No part of this book may be reproduced, stored in a retrieval system, or transmitted in any form or by any means without the prior written permission of the author, except by a reviewer, who may quote brief paragraphs for a review to be printed in a public newspaper, general magazine, school journal, or university article. This novel is a work of fiction, but the entire story is based on the real life of a Muslim girl in Sudan. All names, characters, places, and events are either the product of the author's imagination or used literary. Therefore, any resemblance to real people, living or dead, events, or locales is merely coincidental. Chapter 79. The Words of Great Thinkers, Men and Women, on Islam. To strengthen her arguments against the terrorist verses of the Quran and misogynistic teachings of the hadiths of the alleged prophet of God Muhammad, the genius author, the Muslim apostate girl Ibtihal has quoted the words of some great men and women on Islam. Those thinkers collectively agreed that Muhammad is a false prophet who created a dangerous religion that has become throughout human history the sources for misogyny, invasion, mass murder, genocide, war crimes, pillaging, dispossession, robbery, terror, fear, misery, death, abuse, rape, slavery, forceful conversion, backwardness, poverty, and destruction. Swami Vivekananda is a contemporary Indian philosopher, describes the attitudes of Muslim mujahideen when they invaded India and forced by the sword their religion on Hindus. He says their watchword is, "There is one God, Allah, and Muhammad is his prophet." Everything beyond that not only is bad but must be destroyed forthwith, at a moment's notice. Every man or woman who does not exactly believe in that must be killed. Everything that does not belong to this worship must be immediately broken. Every book that teaches anything else must be burnt. From the Pacific to the Atlantic, for 500 years blood spilled all over the world. That is Mohammedanism, Islam. This is part of his speech that was delivered at the Shakespeare Club of Pasadena, California, the USA, on February 3, 1900. Again, he says, every step forward was made with the sword, the Quran in the one hand and the sword in the other. Take the Quran, or you must die, there is no alternative. This speech he delivered in the Universalist Church, Pasadena, California, the USA, on January 28, 1890. Swami Vivekananda also says, one religion may order something very hideous. For instance, the Mohammedan religion allows Mohammedans to kill all who are not of their religion. It is clearly stated in the Quran, kill the infidels if they do not become Mohammedans, see Surah Al-Tawbah 9, verse 5. They must be put to fire and sword. Now if we tell a Mohammedan that this is wrong, he will naturally ask, how do you know that? How do you know it is not good? My book says it is good. This speech he delivered in London, UK, on November 17, 1896. He goes on to say, in the Quran, there is the doctrine that a human, who does not believe these teachings, should be killed. It is mercy to kill him. And the surest way to get to heaven, where there are beautiful houris, virgins of paradise, and all sorts of sense enjoyments, is by killing these unbelievers. Think of the bloodshed there has been in consequence of such beliefs of Islam. This speech was delivered by Swami Vivekananda in London, the UK, on November 18, 1896. Swami Vivekananda also writes, think of what Muhammad did to the world, and think of the great evil that has been done through his fanaticism. Think of the millions massacred through his teachings, mothers bereft of their children, children made orphans, whole countries destroyed, millions upon millions of people killed. This is a quote from the complete works of Swami Vivekananda. After Swami comes André Servier, a French historian who lived in French Algeria, at the beginning of the 20th century. He became one of the few French intellectuals to study the Sirah, or the biography of the Prophet Muhammad, by Ibn Ishaq in depth. He criticized Islam in his book L'Islam et la psychologie du musulman, saying that Islam is not a torch, as has been claimed, but an extinguisher. Conceived in a barbarous brain for the use of a barbarous people, it was, and it remains, incapable of adapting itself to civilization. Wherever it has dominated, it has broken the impulse towards progress and prevented the evolution of society. He also says Muslims are first and foremost citizens of Islam. They belong morally, religiously, and intellectually to the great Muslim fatherland, of which the capital is Mecca, and whose ruler theoretically undisputed is the commander of the faithful, the Prophet Muhammad. André Servier continues to say, the deadening influence of Islam is well demonstrated by the way in which the Muslim man comports himself at different stages of his life. In his early childhood, when the religion has not as yet made his brain pregnant, he shows a very lively intelligence and remarkably open mind, accessible to ideas of every kind, but in proportion as he grows up, and as through the system of his education, Islam lays hold of him and envelopes him, his brain seems to shut down, his judgment becomes atrophied, and his intelligence to be stricken by paralysis and irremediable degeneration. To sum up, the Arab has borrowed everything from other nations, literature, art, science, and even his religious ideas. He has passed it all through the sieve of his own narrow mind, and being incapable of rising to high philosophic conceptions, he has distorted, mutilated, and desiccated everything. This destructive influence explains the decadence of Muslim nations and their powerlessness to break away from barbarism. Islam is a doctrine of death, inasmuch as the spiritual not being separated from the temporal, and every manifestation of activity being subjected to dogmatic law, it formally forbids any change, any evolution, any progress. It condemns all believers to live, think, and act as lived, thought, and acted like the Muslim men of the 2nd century of the Hijra, 7th century AD, when the law of Islam and its interpretation were definitely fixed. In the history of the nations, Islam, a secretion of the Arab brain, has never been an element of civilization, but on the contrary, has acted as an extinguisher upon its flickering light. Individuals under Arab rule have only been able to contribute to the advance of civilization in so far as they did not conform to the Muslim dogma, but they relapsed into Arab barbarism as soon as they were obliged to make a complete submission to these dogmas. Islamized nations, which have not succeeded in freeing themselves from Muslim tutelage, have been stricken with intellectual paralysis and decadence. They will only escape as they succeed in withdrawing themselves from the control of Muslim law. André Servier concludes, laws prohibiting religious conversion run contrary to Article 18 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which states that everyone has the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. This right includes freedom to change his religion or belief, and freedom, either alone or in community with others and in public or private, to manifest his religion or belief in teaching, practice, worship, and observance. Citing André Servier, L'Islam et la psychologie du musulman, London. Chapman Hall. 1924, pages 2, 18, 153, 161, and 191. Preface, Chapter 16. John Quincy Adams, U.S. President, said the essence of Muhammad's doctrine is violence and lust, to exalt the brutal over the spiritual part of human nature. The British philosopher Bertrand Russell states, over 1 billion people believe in Allah without truly knowing what Allah supposedly stands for or what He really demands of them. And the minority that does understand continues to be Muslims, because they have redefined their theory of morality and daily ethics to fit within the teachings of Islam, which are floridly lacking in morality. They therefore redefine what is good and evil to fit their lives into what is preached by Islam, instead of examining Islam to see if it fits within the good life. It is backward thinking, imposed by a backward religion. Sir Winston Churchill, a British Prime Minister, writes in his book, The River War 1899, how dreadful are the curses which Mohammedanism lays on its votaries. Besides the fanatical frenzy, which is as dangerous in a human as hydrophobia in a dog, there is this fearful fatalistic apathy. Improvident habits, slovenly systems of agriculture, sluggish methods of commerce, and insecurity of property exist wherever the followers of the Prophet rule or live. A degraded sensualism deprives this life of its grace and refinement, the next of its dignity and sanctity. The fact that in Mohammedan law every woman must belong to some man as his absolute property, either as a female child, a wife, or a concubine, must delay the final extinction of slavery until the religion of Islam has ceased to be a great power among human beings. The disease due to a mad dog bite is called hydrophobia in men and rabies in animals. A virus known as rabies virus causes it. The disease occurs when the virus enters the body and multiplies in the brain. All warm-blooded animals and human beings are susceptible to this disease. Alexis de Tocqueville, a French thinker and historian, said, "I have studied the Quran a great deal. I have come away from that study with the conviction that by and large there have been a few religions in the world as deadly to people as that of Muhammad." Ernest Renan, a French thinker, Muslims are the first victims of Islam. Many times, I have observed in my travels that fanaticism comes from a small number of dangerous men who maintain others in the practice of this religion by terror. To liberate the Muslim from his religion is the best service that a person can render him. Will Durant, an American historian, the Islamic conquest of India is probably the bloodiest story in history. It is a discouraging tale, for its evident moral is that civilization is a precious good, whose delicate complex of order and freedom, culture and peace, can at any moment be overthrown by barbarians invading from without or multiplying within. He means to say Muslims multiply from within through their polygamies and from without through invasions, and today through legal immigration of the United Nations resettlements of Muslim refugees in the West, and through illegal human smuggling via the Mediterranean Sea and other ports of the entrances to Europe. Conrad Elst, a Belgian historian, the Muslim conquests, down to the 16th century, were for the Hindus a pure struggle of life and death. Entire cities were burnt down, and the populations massacred, with hundreds of thousands killed in every campaign, and similar numbers deported as slaves. Every new Muslim invader made, often literally, his hills of Hindu skulls. As a contribution to research on the quantity of the Islamic crimes against humanity, we may mention that the Indian subcontinent population decreased by 80 million between the year 1000 conquest of Afghanistan and the year 1525 end of the Delhi Sultanate. This statement proves our early assertion that Muslim mujahideen killed 80 million Hindus and 60 million Christians through their bloody invasions of other nations during their jihad in the name of Allah. Sri Aurobindo, a contemporary Indian philosopher, the only way of making the Mohammedans harmless is to make them lose their faith in their religion. He means to say, to make Muslims not harmful to others is to convince them to forsake their Islamic religion, which in my opinion is something second to impossible. Dr. Syed Mahmood Al-Kimni, a Cairo University lecturer on the sociology of religion, states, "Terrorism is one of the important pillars of Islam, and its means to victory." Al-Kimni 1996, page number 192. He also writes, "The Muslim mujahideen attacked the tribes in the Arabian Peninsula and subjected them by the sword to the new Mohammedan state, after terrorizing them so that they have to join the Medinan alliance." Al-Kimni, page number 235. Dr. Ambedkar, the father of the Indian Constitution, writes, "To the Muslims, a Hindu is a kafir. A kafir is not worthy of any respect. He is a human of a low born, and without status," quoting Pakistan, or the Partition of India, Ambedkar, Volume 8, page 301. Dr. Ambedkar goes on to show that this concept of kafir is extended even to the father of the Indian nation, Mahatma Gandhi, by quoting his comrade in the Khilafat movement, Mr. Muhammad Ali Jinnah said, however pure Mr. Gandhi's character may be, he must appear to me from the point of view religion inferior to any Muslim man, even though he may be without character, and yes, according to my religion and creed, I do hold an adulterous and fallen Muslim man to be better than Mr. Gandhi." Ambedkar, page 302. Muhammad Ali Jinnah was the founder of Pakistan. Ambedkar goes on to say, among the tenets, the one that calls for notice is the tenet of Islam, which says that in a country that is not under Muslim rule, wherever there is a conflict between Muslim law and the law of the land, the former must prevail over the latter, and a Muslim will be justified in obeying the Muslim law and defying the law of the land. Ambedkar, page 292. Ambedkar describes the isolation of Muslim women and the effects of the burqa on their lives. They are usually victims of anemia, tuberculosis, and pyorrhea. Their bodies are deformed, with their backs bent, bones protruded, hands and feet crooked. Ribs, joints, and nearly all their bones ache. Heart palpitation is very often present in them. The result of this pelvic deformity is untimely death at delivery. The process of moral degeneration must and does set in. Being completely secluded from the outer world, they engage their minds in petty family quarrels. The physical and intellectual effects of purdah, or burqa, are nothing as compared to its effects on morals. A social system that cuts off all contact between the two sexes produces an unhealthy tendency toward sexual excesses and unnatural and other morbid habits and ways. It is responsible for the social segregation of Hindus from Muslims, which is the bane of public life in India. Ambedkar, 1990, pages 230 to 232. Thomas Jefferson, U.S. President, says, what they did was founded on the laws of their prophet, that it was written in their Quran, that all nations who should not have acknowledged the Islamic religious authority are sinners, that it was their right and duty to make war upon them wherever they could be found, and to make slaves of all they could take as prisoners, and that every Muslim man who should be slain in battle is sure to go to paradise. Patriarch Sophronius of Jerusalem city, who witnessed with his own eyes the spread of Islam in Arabia and the Levant, and the fall of the holy city of Jews and Christians, described the Muslim invaders as godless barbarians who burned churches, destroyed monk monasteries, profaned the crosses, and blasphemed against Christ and the Church. Muhammad ibn Zakaria al-Razi was a Persian philosopher, writes, if the people of this religion of Islam are asked about the proof for the soundness of their religion, they flare up, get angry and spill the blood of whoever confronts them with this question. They forbid rational speculation and strive to kill their adversaries. This is why truth became thoroughly silenced and concealed. Blaise Pascal, a French mathematician and inventor, writes, Muhammad established a religion by putting his enemies to death, Jesus Christ by commanding his followers to lay down their lives. The founder of the Reformation, Martin Luther, viewed Muhammad as a devil and firstborn child of Satan, citing Muhammad and Mohammedanism, Catholic Encyclopedia 1913. Voltaire, in his play, Muhammad the Prophet, described the Prophet Muhammad as an impostor, false prophet, fanatic, hypocrite, deceitful character, sublime charlatan, and the founder of the false and barbarous sect. Voltaire, Muhammad the Prophet or Fanaticism, A Tragedy in 5 Acts, translated by Robert L. Myers, New York, Frederick Unger, 1964. Voltaire also says, but that a camel merchant should stir up insurrection in his village, that in league with some miserable followers, he persuaded them that he talks with the angel Gabriel, that he boasted of having been carried to heaven, where he received in part this unintelligible book, each page of which makes common sense shudder, that to pay homage to this book, he delivered his country to iron and flame, that he cuts the throats of fathers and kidnaps daughters, that he gives to the defeated the choice of his religion or death. This is assuredly nothing any man can excuse, at least if he was not born a Turk, or if superstition has not extinguished all natural light in him. Referring to Muhammad, in a letter to Frederick II of Prussia, December 1740, published in Overcomplets de Voltaire, Volume 7, 1869, edited by Georges Avenel, page 105. After reading the Quran, Voltaire found in it the contradictions, the absurdities, the anachronisms, rhapsody, without connection, order, and art. Quoting Farid Ali Hadawi, Hussein, 1962. English Arabesque, the Oriental mode in 18th century English literature. Cornell University. He also considered the Quran to be ignoring the laws of physics. Citing Ghani, Ahmed, 1996. Images of Islam in 18th century writings. About Muslims, Voltaire says, "Nothing is more terrible than a people who, having nothing to lose, fight in the united spirit of rapine and of religion." By rapine he means the violent seizure of someone's property through armed robbery. Smollett, Tobias, Morley, John, 1905. The Works of Voltaire, A Philosophical Dictionary, page 105. Finally, Voltaire concluded that Muhammad ordered the murder of his critics. Voltaire, Muhammad the Prophet or Fanaticism, A Tragedy in 5 Acts, translated by Robert L. Myers, New York, Frederick Unger, 1964. Mansur ibn Kamona, a Jewish physician and philosopher, states, "Which is why, to this day we never see anyone converting to Islam unless in terror, in quest of power, to avoid heavy jizya, to escape humiliation, or if taken prisoner, or because of infatuation with a Muslim woman, or for some similar reason. Nor do we see a respected, wealthy, and pious non-Muslim well versed in both his faith, and that of Islam, going over to the Islamic faith without some of the aforementioned or similar motives." Ibn Kamona, Examination of the Three Faiths, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, translated by Moshe Perlman, Berkeley, and Los Angeles, 1971, pages 148 to 149. Dante Alighieri, 1265 to 1321, was an Italian poet, scholar, and philosopher. In his Inferno, Prophet Muhammad is portrayed as split in half, with his guts and intestines hanging out, representing his status as a schismatic, one who broke from the church. A Byzantine writer states that Muhammad is deceiving. "Do prophets come with swords and chariots? You will discover nothing true from the said prophet except human bloodshed." Reference, Walter Emil Kagi, Jr., Initial Byzantine Reactions to the Arab Conquest, Church History, Volume 38, No. 2, June 1969, pages 139, 142, 149, quoting from Doctrina Jacobi Nuperbaptizitip, pages 86 to 87. The Byzantine Emperor Manuel II, 1350 to 1425. In a dialogue with a Muslim Persian scholar, said, "Show me just what Muhammad brought that is new, and there you will find things only evil and inhumane, such as his command to spread by the sword the faith he preached. God is not pleased by blood, and not acting reasonably is contrary to God's nature. Faith is born of the soul, not the body. Whoever would lead someone to faith needs the ability to speak well, and to reason properly, without violence and threat. To convince a reasonable soul, one does not need a strong arm, weapons of any kind, or any other means of threatening a person with death." John of Damascus, 675 to 749, was a Catholic saint, an Assyrian monk and priest writes, "There is also the superstition of the Ishmaelites which to this day prevails and keeps people in error, being a forerunner of the Antichrist. They are descended from Ishmael, who was born to Abraham from Hagar, and for this reason, they are called both Hagarenes and Ishmaelites. They are also called Saracens, which is derived from Sarah's Kenoi, or destitute of Sarah, because of what Hagar said to the angel, 'Sarah hath sent me away destitute.' These used to be idolaters and worshipped the morning star, Lucifer, and the Greek goddess Aphrodite, whom in their own language they called Kabar, which means great, or Allahu Akbar. And so down to the time of Heraclius, the Byzantine emperor, they were very great idolaters. From that time to the present a false prophet named Muhammad has appeared in their midst. This man, after having chanced upon the Old and New Testaments and likewise, it seems, having conversed with a heretic Arian monk, called Bahira, devised his own heresy. Then, having insinuated himself into the good graces of the people by a show of seeming piety, he gave out a certain book that had been sent down to him from heaven. He had set down some ridiculous compositions in his book, and he gave them to them as an object of veneration. It talks about a female camel, which had no father or mother but was born out of a rock. She was owned by an imaginary Arab prophet called Salih who never existed anywhere, Surah Al-Araf 7, verses 73 to 79. She drank the whole river and could not pass through 2 mountains, because there was not enough room. There were people in that place, and they used to drink the water one day, while the camel would drink it the next day. And again, in the Surah of the heifer, Surah the cow too, he says some other stupid and ridiculous things, which, because of their great number, I think must be passed over. There is a Surah on women 4, verse 3, in which he plainly makes legal provision for taking 4 wives, and, if it is possible, a man can have 1,000 concubines, as many as one can maintain them. He made it a law that they are to circumcise their women, and he ordered them not to keep the Sabbath, and not to be baptized. Muhammad had an adopted son named Zaid. This man had a beautiful wife with whom Muhammad fell in love. Once, when they were sitting together, Muhammad said, "Oh, by the way, God has commanded me to take your wife." The other answered, "You are an apostle. Do as God have told you and take my wife." From the Writings by St. John of Damascus, the Fathers of the Church, Volume 37, Washington, D.C., Catholic University of America Press, 1958, pages 153 to 160. Dayanand Saraswati, 1824 to 1883, one of the makers of modern India, says, "The Quran is the result of ignorance, the source of animalization of human beings, a fruitful cause of destroying peace, an incentive to war, a propagator of hostility among humans and a promoter of suffering in the society." He also calls the concept of Islam to be highly offensive, and doubted that there is any connection between Islam with God. Had the God of the Quran been the Lord of all creatures, and been merciful and kind to all, he would never have commanded the Mohammedans to slaughter men of other faiths and animals. If he is merciful, will he show mercy even to the sinners? If the answer is given in the affirmative, it cannot be true, because further on it is said in the Quran, "Put the infidels to the sword." In other words, he that does not believe in the Quran and the Prophet Muhammad is an infidel, he should therefore be put to death. He is referring to Surah Al-Tawbah 9, verses 5 and 29. Dayanand Saraswati continues to say, since the Quran sanctions such cruelty to non-Mohammedans and innocent creatures such as cows, it can never be the word of God. Citing Journal of Indian Council of Philosophical Research, Volume 19, Issue 1, Publisher ICPR, the year 2002, page number 73. Sir William Muir, a Victorian Orientalist scholar. The following words are taken from the Reed lecture that he delivered at Cambridge in 1881. He says, "Some, indeed, dream of an Islam in the future, rationalized and regenerate. All this has been tried already, and has miserably failed. The Quran has encrusted religion in a hard, unyielding casement of ordinances and social laws, that if the shell is broken the life is gone. A rationalistic Islam would be Islam no longer. The contrast between our own faith and Islam is most remarkable. There are in our scriptures living germs of truth, which accord with civil and religious liberty, and will expand with advancing civilization. In Islam, it is just the reverse. The Quran has no such teachings as we have with us, that have abolished polygamy, slavery, and arbitrary divorce, and has elevated women to their proper place. As a reformer, Muhammad did advance his people to a certain point, but as a prophet, he left them fixed immovably at that point for all time to come. The tree is of artificial planting. Instead of containing within itself the germ of growth and adaptation to the various requirements of time, clime, and circumstance, expanding with the genial sunshine and rain from heaven, it remains the same forced and stunted thing as when first planted some 12 centuries ago, quoting Asia, 2nd edition. Published in 1909. By E. Stanford in London, page 458. Oriana Falassi, 1929 to 2006, is an Italian journalist and author. She states that Europe is no longer Europe, it is Eurabia, Arabia, a colony of Islam, where the Islamic invasion does not proceed only in a physical sense but also in a mental and cultural sense. I am an atheist woman, and if an atheist and a pope think the same things, there must be something true. There must be some human truth that is beyond religion. I am disgusted by the anti-Semitism of many Italians, of many Europeans. Look at the school system of the West today. Students do not know history. They do not know who Churchill was. In Italy, they do not even know who Cavour was. Servility to the invaders has poisoned democracy, with obvious consequences for the freedom of thought, and for the concept itself of liberty. State-run television stations contribute to the resurgent anti-Semitism, crying only over Palestinian deaths while playing down Israeli deaths, glossing over them in unwilling tones. The increased presence of Muslims in Italy and in Europe is directly proportional to our loss of freedom. The Muslims refuse our culture and try to impose their culture on us. I reject them, and this is not only my duty toward my culture, but also toward my values, my principles, and my civilization. The struggle for freedom does not include the submission to a religion that, like the Muslim religion, wants to annihilate other religions. The West reveals a hatred of itself, which is strange and can only be considered pathological. It now sees only what is deplorable and destructive. These charlatans care about the Palestinians as much as I care about the charlatans. That is not all. When I was given the news, I laughed. The trial is nothing else but a demonstration that everything I have written is true. President Bush has said, "We refuse to live in fear." A beautiful sentence, incredibly beautiful. I loved it. But inexact, Mr. President, because the West does live in fear. People are afraid to speak against the Islamic world. Afraid to offend, and to be punished for offending, the sons of Allah. You can insult the Christians, the Buddhists, the Hindus, and the Jews. You can slander the Catholics. But woe betides the citizen who pronounces a word against the Islamic religion. Philip Schaff, 1819 to 1893, was a Swiss-born, German-educated, and church historian who spent most of his life living and teaching in the United States. He described Islam as spread by violence and fanaticism, and producing a variety of social ills in the regions it conquered. He also says, Mohammedanism conquered the fairest and best portions of the earth by the sword and plagued and cursed them with polygamy, slavery, despotism, and desolation. The moving power of Christian missions is love for God and men. The moving power of Islam is fanaticism and brute force, quoting Philip Schaff, D.S., 1910. History of the Christian Church. 3rd edition. New York, Charles Scribner's Sons. Volume 4, Chapter 3, Section 40, Position of Mohammedanism in Church History. Next comes the famous writer Abdulmasih ibn Ishaq al-Kindi, a medieval theological polemic. The Apology of al-Kindi. Written at the court of the Caliph al-Mamun, in defense of Christianity against Islam. It is a dialogue between the Arab Christian scholar al-Kindi and the Arab Muslim scholar, Abdullah ibn Ismail al-Hashimi, a member of the Caliphate court. Now tell me, al-Kindi says, what thing thy master, your prophet Muhammad, foretold, or made known, in virtue of which thou holdest him to be a prophet. If thou sayest that he made known to us the history of the prophets that went before him, as of Noah, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, the Messiah, and others, I have a ready answer, namely, that he told us what we knew already, and what even our very children are reading at school. And if thou wilt make mention of such other narratives, as the tribes of Aad and Thamud, of Salih and his she-camel, of the elephant, the year of the elephant, and the like, I reply that these are witless fables, and old wives' tales, such as we Arabs hear night and day, and are no proof whatever of a divine mission. And so the evidence of the past falleth to the ground. But if thou sayest that he foretold what was to happen in the future, it behoveth thee to give instances of the same, for over 200 years have elapsed since his time, and surely something of what he foretold must have come to pass ere this. But thou knowest, and we all know, that thy master never uttered a single word of prophecy, and so, the other condition also failed. Such being the case, let us see whether there is any sign of the second kind of evidence, to wit, of miracles. Now Muhammad himself hath told us plainly that it was said to him, by the Almighty God, nothing hindered us from sending thee with miracles, but that those of old time gave them the lie. That is to say, if it had not been that thy people would have called them impostors, even as those of old did, we should have bestowed on thee the gift of miracles. Now in my life, what, according to all the rules of logic, could be a more conclusive answer? Thou knowest, the Lord guide thee, and all they that hear my apology know, that thy master herein disclaimed miracles as a proof of his mission because he had not the power of showing them, and it is not for an impartial man like thee to turn aside from the truth. If thou claimest, as a proof of his mission, that thy master and his companions, notwithstanding they were few and weak, trampled underfoot the mighty kingdom of Persia, with all its resources, armies, and munitions of war, then we answer thee in the words of the Lord to the children of Israel, not because the Lord loved you above all nations, hath he has given you the victory over the Amorites and Perizzites, so that ye have slain them, ravaged their lands, and inherited their cities, but because of the wickedness of these nations, and the greatness of their iniquity, hath he gave you the victory over them. Thus he mistreated even Jerusalem, the city of his choice, the abode of his prophets, the scene of great wonders and miracles, whence praise and worship ascended day and night, the spot where prayer was to be answered, the seat of blessing from above, when her citizens rebelled against him, set up other gods, denied his signs and forgot his mercies, thinking that they had gotten them by the might of their own hand. Then the Lord gave up Jerusalem into the power of that wickedest of mankind, Nebuchadnezzar the idolater, who slew the inhabitants thereof, even that chosen race, and carried them away captive and their children, and destroyed the house called by his own name. Returning to the excuse of Muhammad that he was not gifted with miracles, lest his people, as of old, should call them impostors, our author repeats, by my life. A strange reason to offer to any man of sense. Allow that the Jews aforetime did give the lie to the miracles of their prophets, and rejected them, what then? As to the Arab tribes, they could never on that behalf have given them the lie, seeing that no prophet had arisen amongst them before, nor any apostle whatever in Arabia, whether with miracles or without them. Doubtless had thy master shown them anything like a miracle, they would have attested the same, and not give it the lie, nor do we not see that multitudes of these same Arabs did accept his ministry, although they saw no miracles, neither heard of any wonderful work. But thou well known, the Lord preserves thee, that this argument will not stand inquiry. I will turn to another subject. Now, we say that the bent of thy master's life doth not answer to the boast that he was sent a mercy and blessing to the human race. On the contrary, his chief object and concern were to take beautiful women as wives, attack surrounding tribes, slay and plunder them, and carry off their females for concubines. His chief delights were, by his own confession, sweet scents, and women, strange proofs these of the prophetic claim. Dennis Prager, an American columnist and author, in responding to a movement that contends that Islam is a religion of peace, wrote, "Now, Islam has never been a religion of peace. It began as a warlike religion and throughout its history, whenever possible, made war on non-Muslims, from the polytheists of North Africa to the Hindus of India, about 60 to 80 million of whom Muslims killed during their 1,000-year rule there." Khalil Abdul Karim was an Egyptian writer, scholar, and lawyer. Commenting on some verses of the Quran, which command jihad against infidels for spreading Islam by the sword, such as Surah Al-Baqarah 2, verses 191 and 193, Surah Al-Nisa 4, verses 76, 89, and 91, Surah Al-Tawbah 9, verses 5, 12, 14, and 29, and Surah Al-Anfal 8, verse 39, the Egyptian Muslim scholar Khalil Abdul Karim states, these verses carry serious orders for the killing of tribes refusing to believe in the faith that is preached by Muhammad. And from the other side, there are hadiths issued by the Prophet that confirm this meaning very clearly, by which we mean killing anyone who refuses Islam. The Prophet Muhammad said, I have been ordered by Allah to fight and kill all people until they bear witness that there is no God except Allah, and Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. If they say it, they uphold from me their wealth and blood. In plain language, the price of non-compliance for anyone who refuses to witness or utter the two shahada, the Islamic creed as proof of accepting the religion of Muhammad, is to lose all protection for his wealth and blood. Accordingly, the killing of one who refuses to utter the two shahada is an obligation to every Muslim without exception. The message of Muhammad to all tribes is, to accept Islam, and you will be safe. Any tribe or an individual who refuses this offer would expose himself to physical annihilation, and his wealth, women, children, and slaves would be taken by the Muslims. Khalil Abdul Karim, 1999, pages 42 to 44. Muhammad Askar, an Iranian author, an apostate, writes, while some of Muhammad's teachings have proven instrumental in crippling the lives of many of his own followers, others have been helping them to create schism and hatred in those humans who follow different philosophies of life. Allahu Akbar, essentially a Muslim war cry, still turns many Muslims engaged in battles, interfaith riots, and sectarian conflicts into ferocious animals. Alleged support given in the past by angels to the warring Muslims against the infidels drives small and weaker Islamic states to challenge the combined might of the world's all-industrialized nations. Murder of the Jews by Muhammad and his hateful teaching against them, in Surah Al-Ma'idah 5, verse 54, still generate fiery desire in most the Muslims for the elimination of all Jews from the face of planet Earth, and his call to kill the pagans whenever and wherever they are found, in Surah Al-Tawbah 9, verse 5. Is a constant source of inspiration for many of his followers to engage themselves in the murder of all the Hindus of the world. His belligerent teachings, as Bernard Lewis has pointed out in his book, The Crisis of Islam, are considered by many Muslims to be a duty for them to destroy the entire world before their apocalyptic design of restoring the Islamic Caliphate can be realized. Louis Bertrand was a French novelist, historian, and essayist. He was the third member elected to occupy seat 4 of the Académie Française in 1925. He states that Arabs have never invented anything except Islam, and they have made absolutely no addition to the ancient heritage of Greco-Latin civilization. George Smith Patton, Jr., 1885 to 1945, was a United States Army officer most famous for his leadership in commanding the corps and armies as a general in World War II. He says, "To me it seems certain that the fatalistic teachings of Muhammad and the utter degradation of women is the outstanding cause for the arrested development of the Arab. He is exactly as he was around the year 700, while we have kept on developing." Samuel Langhorne Clemens, 1835 to 1910, well known by his pen name, Mark Twain, was an American author and humorist. Twain is noted for his novels Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, which has been called the Great American Novel, and The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. He is extensively quoted and was a friend to presidents, artists, industrialists, and European royalty. He says that is a simple rule, and easy to remember. When I, a thoughtful and unblessed Presbyterian, examine the Quran, I know that beyond any question every Mohammedan is insane, not in all things, but in religious matters. William Ewart Gladstone, 1809 to 1898, was a British liberal statesman. He served as a prime minister for separate times, more than any other person. He writes, "The Quran is an accursed book. So long as there is this book there will be no peace in the world." Stephen K. Bannon, President Donald Trump's top strategist. On his radio show for Breitbart News, Mr. Bannon said, "Islam is not a religion of peace. Islam is a religion of submission," and he warned of Muslims' influence in Europe. "To be brutally frank, Christianity is dying in Europe and Islam is on the rise." Tasliman Azreen is a Bangladeshi author and former physician who has been living in exile since 1994. She is the author of the renowned book, Shame. She writes terrorists are not misinterpreting the Quran. It is clearly written in the Quran that non-Muslims must be killed. Secularists who defend Islam have never studied the Quran. The Quran is the root cause of terrorism. Magdi Aulam, an outspoken Egyptian and born Italian journalist, has described Islam as intrinsically violent and characterized by hate and intolerance. In his public letter to the editor of Corriere della Sera about his conversion, Al-Alam stated that Islam was inseparable from Islamic extremism. Criticizing Islam itself, rather than Islamic extremism, Al-Alam argued, I asked myself how it was possible that those who, like me, sincerely and boldly called for a moderate Islam, assuming the responsibility of exposing themselves in the first person in denouncing Islamic extremism and terrorism, ended up being sentenced to death in the name of Islam on the basis of the Quran. I was forced to see that, beyond the contingency of the phenomenon of Islamic extremism and terrorism that has appeared on a global level, the root of evil is inherent in an Islam that is physiologically violent and historically conflictive. Magdi Al-Alam recounts his path to conversion. Zenit, March 23, 2008. Retrieved March 25, 2008. A prominent Muslim jihadi cleric has said, the Quran, in Surah Al-Anfal 8, verse 12 cast terror in their hearts and strike upon their necks. The phrase that they have been commanded to terrorize the disbelievers has been cited in the motivation of jihadi terror. He continues, another aim and objective of jihad are to drive terror in the hearts of the infidels. To terrorize them. Did you know that we were commanded in the Quran with terrorism? Allah said, and prepared for them to the best of your ability with power, and with horses of war. To drive terror in the hearts of my enemies, Allah's enemies, and your enemies. And other enemies which you do not know, only Allah knows them. So we were commanded to drive terror into the hearts of the infidels, to prepare for them to the best of our abilities with power. Then the Prophet said, nay, power is your ability to shoot. The power which you are commanded with here is your ability to shoot. Another aim and clear objective of jihad are to kill the infidels, to lessen the population of the infidels. The Quran says it is not right for a prophet to have captives until he makes the earth warm with blood. See Surah Al-Anfal 8, verse 67. So you should always seek to lessen the population of the infidels. Adolf Hitler, 1889 to 1945, was a German tyrant, highly genocidal, and the worst and biggest terrorist of all time. He is the only person who praised Islam and wished his countrymen, the Germans, were Muslims and not Christians. He says, had Charles Martel not been victorious at the Battle of Poitiers already, you see, the Western world had not already fallen into the hands of the Jews, and so gutless a thing Christianity. Then we should in all probability have been converted to Mohammedanism, that cult which glorifies heroism, and which opens up the seventh heaven to the bold warrior alone. Then the Germanic races would have conquered the world. Christianity alone prevented them from doing so. Hitler continues, you see, it's been our misfortune to have the wrong religion, Christianity. Why didn't we have the religion of the Japanese, who regard sacrifice for the fatherland as the highest good? The Mohammedan religion, Islam, too, would have been more compatible with us than Christianity. Why did it have to be Christianity with its meekness and flabbiness? The Prophet Muhammad. Finally, we need to quote the false prophet's confession. He said, I have fabricated things about and against God, and have imputed to him words which he has not spoken, quoting the history of Al-Tabari, Volume 5, page number 111. He said those words concerning his satanic verses, which he claimed the devil had taught him. But every letter, word, and statement in the Quran and his hadiths are the words of Lucifer, the accursed devil. The critical evaluations of Islam by the above thinkers reveal that Muhammad is an impostor and false prophet, who had been sent by Satan to terrorize and kill people, and therefore terrorism is the core teaching of Islam. The Prophet Muhammad never tried to hide this fact. He said it again and again that he came to terrorize and force people to accept his message, or they would be killed by him and his followers. The Prophet Muhammad said, I have been commanded to fight against people till they testify that there is no God but Allah, that Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. If they say it, they uphold from me their wealth and blood. This hadith is mentioned repeatedly, and time and again in 113 reliable Islamic books. In Sahih al-Bukhari, Book 8, Hadith number 387, and in Sahih Muslim, Book 1, Hadith number 33. The Messenger of Allah said, one who died but did not fight in the way of Allah, nor did he express any desire or determination, for jihad died the death of a hypocrite. Sahih Muslim, Book 20, Hadith number 4696. Narrated Abu Huraira, Allah's Apostle said, I have been made victorious through terror, and while I was sleeping, the keys of the treasures of the world were brought to me and put in my hand. Abu Huraira added, Allah's Apostle has left the world, died, and now you, Muslim mujahideen, are bringing out those treasures. Sahih al-Bukhari, Volume 4, Book 52, Hadith number 220. Again, the Prophet Muhammad said, I have been sent with the sword between my hands to ensure that no one but Allah is worshipped, Allah who put my livelihood under the shadow of my spear, and who inflicts humiliation and scorn on those who disobey my invitation to Islam. He also said, killing unbelievers is a small matter for us. Quoting the History of Al-Tabari, Volume 9, page number 69. Accordingly, Muhammad cannot be compared to any tyrant in human history, that including Hitler. He can hardly be called a human being. He is the personification of evil. He is the devil incarnate. No other man throughout human history has ever created such dreadful and hostile religion and ideology, which became and continues to be the instrument of fear, terror, hate, intimidation, threat, death, torture, rape, abuse, oppression, enslavement, forceful conversion, dispossession of other people's lands, and destruction. No man ever caused such untold numbers of murders as Muhammad did. Every tyrant, every dictator, and every terrorist, when died, his evils died with him in his grave, except Muhammad. For 14 centuries, his evil teachings are haunting the living and dead, and continue to do so even today, 1.5 billion Muslims. Therefore, Islam is not and will never ever be a religion of peace. In conclusion, Islam has been inspired and created by the greatest enemy of God, who is called Satan, the accursed devil, with the sole purpose of destroying humanity. Therefore, if you happen to be a Muslim man or a Muslim woman, and read these chapters on Islam and its founder, it is better for you to forsake it before you die, and end up in hell with the devil and the false prophet Muhammad. For Christians and followers of other religions and other man-made ideologies, please circulate these chapters among your family members, friends, school classmates, work colleagues, and especially your Muslim acquaintances. Chapter 80. 3 decades later. First of all, between this chapter and the previous chapters, there is a gap of over 30 years. To bridge that gap, many books need to be written, otherwise, the story of the dissident princess, the genius Sudanese author and speaker, and the Muslim apostate woman Ibtihal Taha al-Amin may seem to have ended abruptly. Anyone following the story most probably wants to find out what happened to the clash of civilizations between the Western Judeo-Christian civilization and the Oriental Arab-Muslim civilization. What has the Muslims' liberation movement achieved in those 3 decades, if that movement is still there? What has happened to the founder of the Muslims' liberation movement, the gifted Muslim apostate girl Dr. Ibtihal, if Muslim terrorists have not yet assassinated her? How was the crisis between the Western countries and Muslim countries solved? Did Islam survive that devastating and powerful attack on its 2 sacred texts, the Book of the Quran and the Hadiths of the Prophet Muhammad, which has been initiated by the Muslim apostate woman Ibtihal, who is the founder of the Muslims' liberation movement? Is Islam still the second leading religion in the world? To answer these questions, many volumes as big as these 3 books we have already authored need to be written. However, to avoid such an insurmountable challenge, let us concentrate on one specific issue which I believe would give us some glimpse into what happened during those many years. We must find out what has happened to the Muslim apostate wife Dr. Ibtihal and her Sudanese apostate husband, Dr. Kamal. The genius Sudanese beloved Ibtihal and her highly educated lover Kamal are blessed by God with 6 daughters and 2 sons. They named their daughters Ikhlas, Intisar, Rachel, Rima, Layla, and Juliet, and their sons Joshua and Alexander. They had so many difficulties in raising and educating those children. They were not able to send them to public or private schools for the fear of being kidnapped or assassinated by Muslim terrorists. Therefore, they had to hire private tutors to educate their children at home. Meanwhile, the gifted Sudanese woman Dr. Ibtihal and Dr. Kamal were so busy in the affairs of the Muslims' liberation movement that they hardly had any time for their children. They decided to sacrifice the joy of being with their children and dedicated that time to the service of the movement. The lover Dr. Kamal escaped 5 assassination attempts, and his beloved wife Ibtihal survived 15 terrorist attacks. During those years, the gifted woman Dr. Ibtihal wrote and published 1,000 books. All her books have one theme and one goal. The theme of each and every book is exposing the causes of Islamic terror, and its goal is ridding the world of the evils of Islam. Therefore, she has been counted as the most influential figure of the 21st century. She has also been awarded the Nobel Peace Prize 30 years after she began the Muslims' liberation movement. She received such an honorable prize for her great contributions that introduced a cure for the worst epidemic plague of the modern world and eradicated Islamic terrorism forever. The Muslims' liberation movement could not convince all Muslims to forsake their religion. Notwithstanding, after 30 years, Islam became the 4th major religion in the world. Christianity has 3 billion followers, Hinduism 1,500,000 adherents, Buddhism 1 billion believers, and Islam 200 million people. Most of the remaining followers of Islam are Arabs who were born and brought up as Muslims. 1 billion Muslims have left Islam and converted either to Christianity or became atheists, agnostics, or deists. Dr. Ibtihal authored a book which she gave it the title, My Dream Has Come True. In this book, she reminded the world of the vision that she saw when she wrote 30 years ago her book, Let Us Imagine a World Without Islam. Although her dream has been partially fulfilled, her great dream to see a world without Islamic religious terrorism is fulfilled beyond her expectation. Those people who remained Muslims have abolished the law of apostasy, polygamy, wife-beating, child marriage, female genital mutilation, female bodily covering by abaya, hijab, niqab, or burqa, and rejected many more misogynistic teachings in the verses of the Book of the Quran and the hadiths of the alleged Prophet of God Muhammad against women. For them, the Muslim woman is no longer deficient in religion and intellect. Now her testimony in court is equal to the witness of one man, and the inheritance of the sister is the same as her brother. No longer any young man among the Muslim youth is willing to blow up his body in smithereens to kill the so-called unclean infidels in bits and pieces, and goes to paradise to enjoy his 72 virgins and swim in the rivers of wine, milk, and honey. None of them believes in such nonsense any longer. Therefore, the dream of Ibtihal of having a world without terror and terrorists has been fulfilled entirely. About the author of this novel. Dr. Ahmed is an author and scholar. He has 5 university certificates, BA, MA, and Ph.D. in philosophy and comparative studies of religions from India, and a bachelor's and a master's degrees in religious studies and philosophy from Canada. He was born and brought up as a Muslim, but through his study of philosophy and comparative studies of religions he converted to Christianity. He has a unique writing style that can break through any religious, social, and cultural barriers and reveal the truth as it is. In addition, his books are based on first-hand eyewitness because he witnessed the dire conditions of Muslim women with his own eyes. He has written 25 books, but so far has published 10 of them. His books have been written in English and translated by him into Arabic. All his books are on the issues of women in Muslim societies and terrorism in Islam. Some of his novels are available on his YouTube pages as he reads them in English and Arabic.